The subjects of this video are the increase in steel and aluminum tariffs to 50% that will take effect on June 4th, and how the recently passed House bill may impact my investment decisions going forward, which assumes that the Senate does not change the provisions that I'm about to discuss and the provisions become law. I have not read the tax provisions in the bill recently passed in the House. I have read summaries made by lawyers and others just to gain some guidance on how those provisions may impact my investment decisions going forward. The Senate may change those provisions. It is possible that the bill will not pass. I will cite some references in the More section below that will be going into more detail than I will in this summary. The most important change for me relating just to my investments and future investment decisions is the extension of the Section 199A deduction that was set to expire this year, and the increase in that deduction from 20% to 23%. In 2024, the 199 deduction allowed me to reduce my ordinary dividend income paid by equity REITs by 20%. The deduction amount was $645 last year for me, which lowered my contribution to the government's budget deficit some. The deduction only applied last year to taxable REIT dividends and not that part of the REIT dividend payments classified as return of capital. And a considerable amount of those dividends paid by REITs that I owned last year were so classified as return of capital. Another change is that part of the dividends paid by business development corporations, BDCs, which I also own, will be covered by Section 199A to the extent the dividend is sourced from net investment income. If adopted as is, this will make BDCs slightly more attractive to me as investments, but I will still tread lightly in that sector for the reasons that I've discussed in my blog and in prior videos here. Another section called the revenge tax, which is contained in Section 899, could materially alter my bond investing and ownership of foreign dividend stocks. I will cite some references in the More section below that provide more detail than my brief summary here. This is a somewhat complicated subject that has many angles to it. My focus here is just on the dividend and interest income section, part of that Section 899. This new law, if passed by Congress and signed into law by Trump, which it would be, allows Trump to unilaterally abolish tax treaties with foreign countries that limit the amount of tax that the U.S. can withhold from dividend and interest payments made to foreign individuals and institutions and companies. Trump could, on his own initiative, impose a 5 to 20% tax in addition to the limit provided in the tax treaty, which in effect abolishes the limit of the tax treaty. Treaties mean nothing to Trump, including the UMCSA agreement that he negotiated and signed in 2020. Trump is given the power to increase federal taxes on interest and dividend payments in this section made to foreign owners to combat what he considers to be unfair taxes in the foreign countries. Perhaps he needs to tell the Secretary of Treasury to make a finding along those lines before he can impose the increase in taxes. When implemented by Trump, foreign investors would be less likely, in my opinion, to buy debt issued by the U.S. government and U.S. corporations due to the higher income tax withholding. It would also be more likely to reduce existing holdings, and that would also apply to stock and dividend paying U.S. corporations. Those reactions may also occur as retaliation measures to the Republican tariff taxes and may be occurring now to some extent. There could also be less foreign investment in the U.S. based on an increase in the income tax rates. When implemented, interest rates on domestic debt will have to rise in order to attract buyers and to clear what has to be sold in new debt. That would be for both the U.S. government and U.S. corporations. Do the math on what a 1% increase in interest rates on Treasury debt, which is growing now at over $1 trillion per year, would cost on the current debt, which is near $36.3 trillion. If the Senate keeps this provision and it becomes law, Trump will abuse this authority, as he has done already in the limited emergency powers granted to the president on the tariff issue. Once Trump, in effect, abolishes the foreign tax treaties, and he will if Congress gives him that power, the impacted foreign countries would respond by taxing U.S. institutions and individuals at the maximum rates for interest and dividend payments and other sources of income as well. This will result in chaos, the new normal now, and less investment in U.S. capital markets by foreigners. The U.S. needs their capital, of course. Trump announced last week that he would increase the tariffs on all steel and aluminum imports to 50% from 25% effective on June 4th. If he does that, and this may be another taco moment, when implemented, those tariffs will raise prices for heavy users of those metals, including U.S. auto companies and heavy machinery manufacturers. And those metals are also heavily used in major building construction. This increase in the Republican tariff taxes will increase prices paid by U.S. consumers and will result in net job losses. While the Republicans may save and add a few steel manufacturing jobs with those tariff taxes, about 75 times more people are employed and heavy users of steel and aluminum products, and they will have to lay off people. The 50% tariff on steel and aluminum on the Canadian exports of steel and aluminum is an extremely hostile and unprovoked attack by the U.S. on Canada, equivalent in many respects to a declaration of war. It will take time before the Republican tariff taxes are collected from the U.S. consumers. It is a regressive tax that will be disproportionately paid by lower income households, including those who pay no federal income tax at the present time, which includes about 40% of taxpayers. The reason for that is that there is a glut of inventory imported by U.S. companies and other importers before Trump had an opportunity to implement his broad-based tariff taxes on U.S. imports.